All right, let's talk about learned helplessness in terms of biblical leadership. And I think it's really important to know that when we talk about biblical leadership, it's equivalent to servant leadership, but really it kind of removes you from the equation in that you are expected to be a little bit selfless in these situations. And that is part of the hardest, probably some of the hardest part that leaders have to learn is that you are essentially basing your success off of the success of others. And so if you're going to just constantly focus on your own success, okay, then you're not giving enough credit to the people who are actually doing the work. Now, you may be coordinating, it may or may not be your idea, it may be all of these things. You might be putting it all together, you might be getting people to show up and holding them accountable and all of those things. And that's perfectly acceptable because that's your job. But it's more of a proud parent type attitude than it is, oh, thank you to me. And so we're going to use the stories in the Bible to kind of support this concept and why it's so important. And then we're going to just talk about some like really concrete tips on how to do this. And so let's dive into the Bible. So the first one that we're going to talk about is the Passover. And the Passover is when Moses has already gone and tried to change the Pharaoh's mind on letting the Israelites go. And this is kind of the final attempt at doing so. And one of the things that I think is really important, even when you go and you read the book of Exodus, is you have to focus on how compassionate God is, okay? He recognizes, he even states in there that their hearts are heavy from being in slavery for quite some time. And so he is very, very, very patient with them, okay? Even through these plagues, even through the Passover. But the Passover is really the kind of the first time that really delineates the difference between Israelites and the Egyptians. And how that happens is he gives them protection over their firstborn of the animals, of their children. He gives full protection over that. And when he does that, and only the Egyptians experience that loss, that's the first time that really the Israelites get to see the true power of God in terms of exceptions, right? So they see God send frogs, they see him change water, they see him do all these things, but these are all happening to everybody. And this is the time that it's not happening to them in such a big, big way. And so I think it's important to kind of talk about that specific time because God gives them everything that they need in order to, have them pass over. And it really is the defining moment of them being able to leave or not. It's ultimately what softens the Pharaoh's heart to them leaving and them being able to escape. And so we want to, when we're in a work scenario and we can do something in protection of the team or protection of the person to kind of limit them and to build that trust with them, that is very important when we're talking early on about maybe taking over a team or seeing somebody who's been having a little bit of a downward mindset in terms of learned helplessness. That is the first step in creating a little bit of trust, okay? If you can imagine God coming into that situation and saying, hey, we're all going to lose our firstborn, but we're going to be free. So you're going to make this one small sacrifice, but freedom is in the horizon. It wouldn't feel like freedom. It wouldn't feel like that love that God really exhibited when he did what he did, okay? And so when we take it into a work type setting or with these individuals, we want to make sure that we make them feel like they can trust you in this scenario, that you are going to protect them, you are going to take care of them. And you can either find ways to make this happen or create ways. And I know that that sounds kind of weird, but when we talk about creating some safety boundaries is you may not have the absolute opportunity, but you can kind of talk through some of the expectations or some of what you want to what you believe in, and then make sure. But if you talk about it first, because you have to create it, you need to make sure that you back it up. Okay. And when you talk about something, you want to talk about it openly, honestly, and frequently. Okay. If you say it one time and then 3 months later you actually do it because the opportunity presents itself, They may not believe you right away. So you want to talk about it often, but then you have to back that up. So don't pick something that's super complicated that maybe you can't make a promise on. We definitely don't want to break any promises, but pick some small things that you can hold to, like I value family when it comes to scheduling. This is what I find important. I will do everything I possibly can to get you this day off, or something that you really can demonstrate and really help support, even if it means you quote unquote working a shift or taking on a workload momentarily for that to happen. Because eventually, once you build enough team dynamic support, you'll get to be able to be phased out of that. So that's the first time, right? And so then we're going to go to when they get to the Red Sea, okay? And so they get to the Red Sea, and God tells them to go a certain way. Okay. First, he protects them and he says he doesn't want to see. He had them go a specific route so that they wouldn't see a lot of things. But then he sends the Pharaoh. He hardens the Pharaoh's heart to come after them. And when you think, okay, well, why would he do that? They were already scared. But he got to that was kind of like a demonstration of power. Okay. So when the Israelites crossed and the Egyptians were washed away, it was kind of God signaling to them that it's finished, okay? That it's taken care of and it's over, okay? And so let's say that this learned helplessness is a scenario where you have an employee maybe that isn't, maybe an employee is bullying a group of people, or they've created this like horrific situation that has created this learned helplessness, right? So I'm making up a story. Let's say that we have this, we have this charge nurse that maybe has created this tyranny situation on the unit. Maybe they've been kind of treating people poorly for quite some time. And so you come in and you're like ending the behavior, right? And so you go and you address the issue head on, and you're like, we're not going to tolerate this anymore. They're going to be written up for these things. We're not going to allow certain behaviors, and you correct the behavior real time every time. Maybe you see it. Maybe you have a private conversation with that person and you say, my understanding is that you have this perception and this is no longer going to be accepted. And what are some things that you're going to take care of it? But you're going to basically kind of wash away the sting and the memory of whatever it is that might be bringing that forward. And so God had already built a little bit of trust with them with Passover. And so this is just another way to build some small trust. Does that mean that he protected them from everything that ever came for them? No, not necessarily, right? But you want to be able to kind of wash away some of the things that may have created that environment. And especially when it comes to people, okay? And people can create scenarios, even within a team dynamic, to have that learned helplessness. Whether it's on purpose or not is not necessarily relevant in these situations. And I think sometimes people get so caught up on that. Well, like, oh, well, she doesn't mean it that way, or that's just her personality, and all. We don't care, okay? And I know that might sound kind of harsh, but when we talk about the team dynamics, we have to think about things in the sense of greater good and what is good for everyone and what opportunities everyone has and what we're willing to tolerate as a leader. And even if it's an individual, and like maybe you're not necessarily a leader, like you don't have the title, you can choose about like what it is that you are going to tolerate and what you're not going to tolerate. And so some people will say, oh, well, I have to quit. No, not necessarily, not all the time. This is where good coaching comes in, right? This is where really working on yourself and working on your communication and working on all of those things kind of really plays into building yourself up and really spending some time on building your skill set, because there are ways to deal with things that will likely not get you fired or whatever it is that you might be worried about. But I will tell you this, okay? If your environment is truly one that you're never going to change, if it's truly just that terrible that it is affecting your mental health and all those things, then it might even be better for you to step away. So if you worked and you used all those tools and you weren't seeing the changes, maybe because there is that favoritism or something like that that you might be seeing, okay? My recommendation is that you always try first, and I mean try, I don't mean like half effort, I mean full effort to make the change. And if it's not really working out, then you can go ahead and leave. And because it's important to understand that while there is all kinds of good in the world, we recognize that there's also not good in the world, okay? And nobody should be subjected to that for long periods of time. And it's kind of like a shopping thing. You get to choose where you work. You get to choose where you shop. You may not have always the best options, and I understand that there's some limitations there, but it is a choice in what we do accept and what we don't accept. And so in this particular example, we're going to talk, we're talking about, maybe those dynamics where I can say, I'm really not going to tolerate you speaking to me that way. When you can speak to me in a way that's appropriate, then you're more than welcome to come back. That means that we might, you don't hold a grudge, you're not talking disrespectfully, you're not raising your voice, you're not doing any of those things. And I often see this in people where they get caught up in that, right? And the other person speaks to them inappropriately and they respond back snarky, and they want to be like, well, they started it. There is no starting it in professionalism, okay? There is only a person's behavior. So if the other person starts it, you don't contribute, okay? And you'll see them even rise and rise and rise when you are not responding, and that's okay. Let them get even more in trouble. But it takes a massive amount of control for you to be able to not let it not respond. And so, again, it's practice, it's all those things, but you can kind of set some firm boundaries. And we see God, kind of level set the expectation that I am God, okay? This enemy is an enemy no more. This is not going to be something that you're dealing with now. I have made you a promise, and I'm taking you to the promised land. And then later he even goes to guide them, by the cloud by day and fire pillar by night. Like, it is something that he, like, not necessarily, people will say, well, I don't want to handhold my team, okay? Well, you might have to for a little while. You might have to concede that this is what they need in that moment. He really took care of the things that he needed to take care of. Did he stay that way? No. No, he did not. He started to hold them more and more and more accountable throughout the book of Exodus, right? So you see them complain about bitter water early on. And what does he do? He gives them a log to throw in the water to make it sweet, okay? He doesn't do anything, but he does kind of set an expectation. And he says, if you will diligently listen to the voice of the Lord your God and do what is right in his eyes, and give ear to his commandments and keep all his statutes, I will put none of the diseases on you that I put on the Egyptians, for I am the Lord your healer. So he kind of plants that first level set of expectations. This is when he kind of moves into that accountability realm. And there will be a time for that whenever you're taking on a team that doesn't necessarily have a lot of trust, okay? Once you start building and building and building, you can transition. It is okay. It doesn't make you fake or doesn't change anything. They'll still go through a little bit of a transition when you're doing that, but it is building, and building on something is more weight, okay? If I have a foundation and I have a strong foundation, it's gonna hold whatever else I build up on here. But that doesn't mean it's not heavy, okay? That doesn't mean it's not hard. That doesn't mean that it doesn't take time. That doesn't mean all of those things that associate with building. And so we have to be patient, but we have to make sure that we are taking it step by step. Okay, so God sets the expectation, right? He says, if you follow my commandments, I'm not going to do these things for you. So then 5 minutes later, not really, but whatever, 5 minutes later, they come across and they are upset that they are hungry, right? And so they want to eat, and they're not exactly satisfied that that they left the life that they were living, where they at least had meat and food and different things, and now they're in the wilderness. And so what does God do? God tells him, I'm going to give you fresh bread every morning, and I'm going to give you like the meat that they were requesting. So God makes quail come out of the sky, and he gives them the manna, okay? And then he gives them rules on how to do this. So he gives them provisions, and then he gives them guidance on the provision. And so I'm really sorry. I really need to change the settings. But he gives them guidance to do this so that they will begin to follow the rules, okay? Now, we remember we talked about that phasing in, and we're going to be doing things for them. So he kind of sets a different idea of expectation on what he wants them to do. So he wants them to collect manna on these specific time frames, okay? He talks to them about meat. He talks about them with the things that he should be doing with the day of rest. And he even makes it so that the on a regular day this bread doesn't carry over, but on the Sabbath it does carry over. On the day of rest he has it carry over, and it lasts that long. And so it's important to note that he does still take care of them. There is some level of hand holding as he's setting these expectations, and he's very, very patient, okay? And then when they wanted water, they start grumbling again, and he goes and he gives them water. Well, when we get deeper and deeper into Exodus, you can see him hold more and more people accountable, okay? And when he starts to work on the individuals, it gets a little bit interesting on how he even kind of coaches Moses through these things, right? So when he talks to him about water, I'm going to pause it for just a second because my son is sitting here whispering, Mom, Mom, Mom. 1 second. Okay, sorry. Okay, so when Moses starts to experience that learned helplessness because these people don't stop complaining, okay? So now we're transitioning who the leader is, right? So Moses is like kind of like, "Oh my gosh, these people won't stop complaining. Lord, what do I do now?" And this is where God kind of has a private conversation with them, okay? And God starts to give Moses exactly what he needs in order to be able to lead. And so in this particular example, he tells them how to give them water. He tells them all these things because God is working. Moses is kind of leading these people, and he's kind of talking to them and telling them, don't you trust God and all of these other things. But God is also leading Moses during this time. And as these people should be coming out of learned helplessness, and obviously we know that they kind of don't. We know that this generation never gets to make it to the promised land. And that's unfortunate, right? But what I think the difference is, and you're thinking, well, how's my learned helplessness going to work versus when it didn't necessarily work for Moses? A, the circumstances are a little bit different, okay? But B, Moses started to fall into this place of learned helplessness as well. He starts to get angry, okay? And ultimately it's his anger that keeps even him from going to the promised land. So that is this is the idea of what we're talking about. We're using strategies and doing these things to prevent ourselves from entering into a place of bitterness. And you might think, oh, well, I don't necessarily, these people can't get to me. Over time, I'm pretty sure they do. I don't know this for certain, and this is definitely not a political statement at all. It's just the fact that I've seen president after president enter into presidency and coming out of presidency looking tremendously older. And so whether it was a good one or a bad one is indifferent, right? But if we take ourselves and put ourselves in a leadership position or a caring for someone position, it can significantly age us. It can cause health effects. I like to tell people, like, let's say when you get really angry and your chest gets tight or your jaw clenches, or you're sore, you wake up and your body hurts from maybe sleeping wrong or just sleeping angry or any of those kinds of things. If you can feel it physically, it has affected you physically. Okay, so to pretend that these things are not affecting you is really just a statement that you're making that's absolutely false. If you can feel the tightness of your chest, if your mental load is heavy, if all of those things are true and are happening, then it is affecting you physically. And so we want to just kind of make sure that where we're at and where we're at mentally, physically, is just a place of peace, okay? A place of centeredness. We may not stay there all the time, but that's really the goal, okay? And so when we look at what Moses does when he talks to God, and God tells him, just take your staff and kind of hit the rock or whatever, that's God's way of meeting Moses one-on-one and giving him a win, okay? He gives him something super easy that he can do in order to support them, okay? And Moses obviously credits God, but in real life, in a work setting, I want you to credit the person whose idea it was to get water. Okay, so whatever the idea is, I want you to go out into that group and I want you to give them as much credit as you can to speak up, to empower them in different ways. Like, so let's say that Aaron is the one that comes and says we need water or whatever. All right. And Aaron might be speaking for the group. He may not. He may just really want water. It doesn't matter at this point when we're trying to get people to come out of learned helplessness. It doesn't matter who says it. Doesn't matter what the win is. You just want to credit the right person, okay? And so you're going to take care of it. And then you're going to go talk about that win. Like, oh, Aaron recommended that we get water and this is how we did it and this is why we did it. And it was such a good idea for the entire team. Or you're going to go spread the word on and giving that person credit, okay? And then that person, especially if you're strategic in who you're picking for that win, then they're going to gain in trust. And so when they come to you, they're going to come to you with something else. It's going to be like a test, like a game. Like, okay, well, surprisingly, she fixed the water. Let me see if this is real. Let me see if she'll fix something else. And so they'll come forward and they'll bring it forward. Well, that's when I want you to partner with them. I want you to say, oh, okay, well, let's do this together. How can we work together to do this? Even if it means you carry a little bit more of the load, okay? You are building. So you're getting them to you're just building up that trust, okay? And then somebody else is going to see that you're making changes, that you're willing to hear them, that you are interested in what's happening in the workplace and those kinds of things. Because oftentimes learned helplessness comes, you take on a team and you're like, hey, what ideas, what do you need to make better? And they're just kind of sitting at you, staring at you. I can remember when I took over a lot of teams. So this was later. I had switched companies and had taken over this team. And this team had been through like 5 different managers in like a short amount of time. And they were just so not interested in having another manager. And so I come in and I'm like, hey, I'm here to make things better and blah, blah, blah. And this person looks me up and down and they said, we'll see how long you last. After I was asking all those questions, right? So they were in a state of learned helplessness. So did I get to move as quickly as I wanted? No. I spent time with them. I spent time getting individual wins with them. I did a lot of it up front, okay? Let's say that they needed a scheduling change, I would contact everyone, okay? I would try everything in order to get them to do that. And then slowly I built it to the point where I said, well, you have a team. Did you ask your team members? Why don't you go ask A, B, and C? And then slowly I just got out of it. Like they didn't need me anymore. They would go and say, hey, I've already made the switch. So-and-so agreed to change with me, blah, blah, blah. So it was a phased approach, but it does work, okay? It is solid. But sometimes you have to have that one-on-one time. Sometimes it's not a group setting, okay? Sometimes you just need to, if they all have hardened hearts, you need to find the one that's cracked, okay? So that maybe you can seep in there. You may not be able to reach everybody all at the same time, and that's okay. You just need to be able to find the one that might be willing to partner with you, and you make slow change. And the most important thing is to understand what you're doing. If you understand what you're doing, why you're doing it, and have a reasonable time frame of expectation, you're going to feel a lot less pressure about your progress, okay? I'm not saying you won't feel pressure, because you're still going to get pressure from above to make your changes, right? It's just that you're going to understand that it is a process, okay? And I can remember after, I mean, honestly, that girl telling me that, I'm sorry. That girl telling me that was only a small portion of like the terribleness that I experienced on that unit with all the things that people told me. People were pretty awful to me at that point. Okay. So that was just one small thing. But I can remember stopping and thinking, saying, because I left an organization where I had a pretty good team. I mean, I didn't have I was well established. Things were working out for me. I just wanted a different opportunity in a different type of setting. And honestly, my husband said I was never going to leave. And so just to prove him wrong, it makes me sound terrible, but that's the truth. So he said I wouldn't. So I did. And so I left this new place, and I was thinking, what did you do? You went and you left this team that loved you, that everything kind of operated well, and you came into this. And ultimately, God works in mysterious ways, okay? They needed a leader, and they needed a leader that cared about them. And even though I was frustrated with where my circumstances were, I really did care about them. And I think that with time, if you really care about them as people, you will be able to make change, okay? It may not be making change with the people that are there. You might have to fire them. So when God said, this generation is not going to go into the promised land, he fired that generation. Okay? If you cannot make the change that you need to make with the team that you have, sometimes you have to let that go. And I know that that's not necessarily favored, okay? And I know that that makes, like, if an employee was listening to this, they would be like, oh, she just wants 5. No, 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 no. Okay, listen. If you don't have the right heart posture from a team, if they're in this state that they're never going to be able to get out of, so God gave them every opportunity to get out of it. And I want you to do the same when you take over a new team or you're dealing with them in these situations. I want you to give them every opportunity to make it right. But once you recognize that it's not changing, or maybe they fall into old habits over and over and over again, it's time to cut your losses, okay? And that's hard, okay? As a leader, do you want to know why it's so difficult? Because you think, I've already invested in them this much. Or we try to justify some things like, they're so much better than they were. They're not where I want them to be, but they're better than where they were. The question is, are they ever going to get to where you want them to be? And if the answer is no, they need to go. And it is okay to do that when you have a different vision. I I I I want you, excuse me, I want you to consider the fact that your success, again, we talked about this a minute ago, your success is measured by their success. And if the right people aren't there to get for you to make them successful, that ultimately impacts your success, we can't just keep saving these people, okay? God recognized that he was not going to get that generation to do what they needed to do. He recognized that they were not going to follow him. They were not going to have faith. They were not going to keep his commandments, okay? And he let them wander until they all went away. And then he took the ones that did, and he was able to get into the promised land. Was it perfect? No. Was it kind of challenging with some of them? A little bit, okay? But ultimately, you can get where you're going slowly, steadily, and with patience and love and understanding, okay? And you can still have patience, love, and understanding. I can love that person. I can say, I enjoy your company. You are a great person. You're just not capable of getting me where we need to go. Okay, I wish you the best, and I hope you find a place that is the right fit for you, because this is not the right fit. And so I just really want to encourage you that this is not necessarily all about letting people go, but there is a point, okay? And we see it in God. We see it with, even recognizing, God recognizing not only did the generation not meet, but that Moses didn't, okay? He he is seeing that Moses is not the person that's going to be able to carry what his quote, I'm going to call it his legacy, okay, but that his vision, that's what I'm going to call it. I'm going to call it his vision. And if you knew that I don't edit and this is not practiced in a way, so just go with it. But he knew that Moses wasn't going to be able to carry his vision the way that he wanted it carried. And he knew that the moment that Moses decided to get angry and he told him to speak to the rock to give them water, and he hit it with the staff 2 times, right? And so in his tantrum and after everything that he had been through, everything that he had seen time after time of coaching Moses, just as much as he was coaching and telling the other Israelites to follow them, he knew in that moment that that wasn't it. And so did that mean that he didn't love Moses? No, clearly he loved him. Okay. Does that mean that you can't show them compassion and understanding? Does that mean that he didn't give him every opportunity? All of those things are true. Okay. But ultimately it just wasn't what was the best in the end. And so I can tell you that doing right by people is difficult sometimes, as much as it is rewarding in other situations. And so we can get through hard things. We can do hard things. It's okay. We can understand that people are going to be upset. I often coach people to help them understand, again, and I say this, and you're gonna hear like repeating patterns in some of my videos, but you can and you should allow the other person to experience those emotions as they experience them. Okay. If you're gonna go and you're gonna coach them and you're gonna fix them, and they feel bad and they're crying and all of those kinds of things, it's okay. Okay. As long as they're hearing what we're saying in terms of expectations, we're going to let them think about it. We're going to let them process it out. If they're disappointed in themselves or or they're angry at you, that's okay. Let them be angry at you for a little while. But we were like, we want it to be okay. So we're like, no, it's okay. I'm not, well, no. Okay. I made you upset. I'm gonna let you think on that, and you can think about it, and you can see if I really did something. Then when we're both calm and you're calmer and I'm calm and we want to have a different conversation, I'm open to hearing it. Okay. But in this moment, I'm going to allow you to feel whatever you're going to feel. They can walk away from the situation, and then you can move on from that, whatever that looks like. Right. So, an example, if I'm letting you go and you're crying and you're telling me, that you have all of these things in your life that are happening, and it's not that I'm cold-hearted. I have empathy to your situation. It's just not something that I have the ability to control in terms of what you bring to the table and what is needed for this position. That doesn't mean that God isn't going to have a different plan for them, okay? I have seen lots of people prosper after leaving a job thinking that firing was the worst thing, and ultimately God makes it for their good. And that's a biblical promise, right? So I have to have faith in that moment that God is going to take care of them in whatever way that looks like. And I am just one singular piece in a moving chessboard and how this all plays out. I may even be unknowingly following God's plan, okay? But I know that I'm walking away from the situation knowing that I have done everything that I possibly can for this employee. I have given them every opportunity, and they have chosen to not do it, okay? So we see these things. We see God tell them, choose to follow me, choose this, do this, and they choose not to, okay? So it's a personal responsibility thing. If they choose not to, for whatever reason, I don't care if they like it, they don't like it, they think it's unfair, they think it's fair, but they just forgot. Whatever the reason is, if they choose not to do it, then it is a choice for them, and we're going to be okay with it. And so if you have any questions or anything, you can always leave a comment. I hope this helps a little bit with some of the learned helplessness, and I appreciate you listening.